the moment I understood the weakness of my flesh, it disgusted me.
From tabletop miniatures to animated shows, from a library of novels to a range of video games, Warhammer 40,000 is probably one of the most fascinating sci-fi universes I've had the chance to explore. And even though I'm still a relatively new fan of 40k, it feels so incredibly exciting to dive back into this universe. Especially with how this franchise's stock feels like it's on the rise. With positive news stories, the upcoming live action projects involving Henry Cavill, and a new wave of 40k games, including Mechanicus 2, it felt like the right time to finally check this one out. So this is my retrospective review of Warhammer 40,000 Mechanicus.
Even in death, I serve the Omnisire.
I'll be honest, the story here wasn't really the main attraction for me. Mechanicus is presented less like a traditional narrative following a single character's journey, and more like one that follows a cohort's exploits as they explore new worlds and uncover the lore of Warhammer 40,000. As the crew of the Imperial starship Adeptus Mechanicus, your cohort investigates a lost expedition on the planet Silver Tenebris. Of course, things go awry, and you discover it's actually an ancient Necron tomb world. Being part of the Imperium, your tech priests start poking around and messing things up, in the name of science and progress obviously. As a result, the Necrons are slowly woken up, and naturally they're a bit grumpy after such a long nap. This all feeds directly into one of the game's key mechanics, the Awakening meter. Acting as a global threat timer, it steadily builds towards the endgame, eventually triggering a final confrontation. Both mechanically and thematically, it adds a real sense of urgency, one the player can actively influence through mission completion, combat, encounters, and side objectives. Interestingly, once you've completed a mission, the timer is set. It can only increase, not decrease, so your choices do matter. Story-wise, it's not the most deep or emotional experience, but there's still plenty here, especially for lore fans. The cast of characters, for example, is surprisingly interesting, each with their own perspectives, priorities, and mission chains, each offering different rewards. And what I found really cool is that depending on which missions you complete, can actually affect the ending, of which there are apparently 4 different outcomes available. Something I definitely wasn't expecting going in. During the actual missions, you also get small dialogue moments, little snippets that add context or flesh out characters, and gives you glimpses into the wider universe. The writing is definitely peak Warhammer. Overly dramatic, hyper-religious, entirely self-aware, and completely unafraid to embrace it. And I absolutely love it. Like right down to these puns that they use as choice options during exploration. It's just perfect. It's the kind of writing that fully commits to its source and its vision and never once breaks character. The dialogue, the phrasing, the mechanical coding language woven throughout, it's also perfectly on brand for 40k. The devs have really understood the assignment here. Hey, if you've ever asked for tech support, you should like this video. It increases your chances of appeasing the machine spirit. Visually, Mechanicus is one of those games that gets better the longer you spend with it. At first, if I'm honest, I wasn't entirely sold, especially on the character portraits, but over time the art style really grew on me. There's a surprising amount of detail and, well, character to them, especially once you notice the subtle animations and lighting during gameplay. The overall aesthetic is incredibly on brand for 40k, fully leaning into that classic exaggerated larger-than-life dark fantasy vibe of the pre-2000s. Massive bionic limbs with huge heavy mechanical augmentations and those drab and deeply religious robes all combine to sell the identity of the Mechanicus so well. The Necrons are just as strong, with that glowing green energy, metallic skeletal designs and those stylized Egyptian-inspired tile sets. What really stands out though is how well these two factions contrast, yet blend together so easily. The retro industrial tech of the Mechanicus against the eerie green hieroglyphics of the Necrons. It all comes together perfectly to create a really distinct and cohesive visual identity, especially during transitions. Graphically, the game might seem a bit simplistic at first glance, but once you spend a bit more time with it, panning around, zooming in, and moving across the battlefield, it's actually pretty impressive. And the ability to get right up close during combat is such an awesome addition, especially when you set up an attack and watch enemies get blasted backwards. It's one of those small touches that really elevates the experience. adding flair to what is otherwise a more methodical, slower paced combat system. It also fully embraces that Warhammer rule of cool ideology, where if something looks awesome, it takes priority over strict rules or realism. That said, there are a few issues. The battle grid isn't always completely clear, which might be a skill issue on my end, but can lead to moments where you accidentally block your own pathing, something that can be pretty punishing in a tactics game. And I did run into a few minor visual bugs on the upgrade screen, nothing game breaking but noticeable. Still, these are small drawbacks in what is otherwise a very strong and stylish package. Of the 4 categories I usually break games down into for my retro videos, audio is rarely something I leave toward the end, mostly because I tend to rank things from least to most impactful, and more often than not I lean towards story. When it comes to Mechanicus, the soundtrack is easily one of its standout aspects. This might be one of the coolest soundtracks I've heard in a strategy game. It's this fusion of electronic synths, distorted machinery, church organs, symphonic vocals, and heavy metallic rhythm. And somehow it all comes together cohesively to create something that feels both ancient and futuristic. It sounds like religion filtered through a machine. The dark, gloomy atmosphere is tangible. It's gripping, almost suffocating. And when that music crescendos, it's as if you're entranced. They've managed to give these Martians their own audible identity. Each track has its own tone, energy, and flavor, and yet they're all heavy and incredibly consistent. Where most games might have a few standout tracks, Mechanicus' strength is in its consistency, and even on repeat listens, it doesn't wear out its welcome. Honestly, I feel like someone could remix these into full EDM tracks. The sound design is just as solid, even if it's a bit more subtle. Weapon effects, unit actions, resource collection is all well handled. And has this nice tactical feel to it. The mission end tally screen itself also has some really great sound effects, and it's so satisfying to hear. The voice work may be a bit more divisive. It's heavily digitized, distorted, and synthesized, which is completely in line with the lore, but might not land for everyone. Personally, I think it's such a nice touch, and it definitely deserves praise for how lore accurate it is. Interestingly, while it may not be an official reason, this style of voice work likely helped the studio save on potentially costly voice acting. I think this is the perfect example of the devs playing to the strengths of the material they were adapting, showing real respect for the source. There's a clear level of understanding and restraint shown here, and even though it's mostly unintelligible, it still retains a lot of charm. What it lacks in clarity, it more than makes up for in identity. Sure, it's a bit out there, but it's just really cool. It's stylized, but feels perfectly on brand for the world of Warhammer 40,000. Hey, if you're still watching, you should definitely subscribe and show your allegiance. The Imperium needs your support. Now, just a quick disclaimer. I'm not that well versed or experienced with grid-based tactics games, even though I do enjoy them, so do keep that in mind in case I get anything wrong. I actually thought I was burned out on turn-based games. But recently, games like Clarobscure reminded me how satisfying the genre can be. And if E33 lit the spark, Mechanicus was the Prometheum. Instead of following a single path, you're given multiple mission chains by the Magi aboard the Ark, which you can complete in your own order. Each mission begins with an exploration phase. On this tomb map, you're given a choice of paths to follow, each leading to interconnected rooms which often trigger events. These can range from small narrative events, to glyph minigames, or even combat, often impacting your run through buffs, damage, cognition points, or changes to the awakening meter. The awakening meter, as mentioned earlier, is essentially a global threat timer, and once it hits 100%, you're locked into the endgame. So from the very beginning, you're on the clock. Combat begins when you reach key rooms, shifting into the traditional tactics grid where you'll spend most of your time. Each battle starts with unit placement, which can have a big impact before a turn is even taken. From there, units take turns moving, attacking, healing, completing objectives, and collecting cognition points, with a turn order randomly set once combat begins. The core system here is cognition points, or CP, or COGS, something I'd guess is inspired by the tabletop game. Most actions cost CP, from attacks to abilities and even extended movement, turning each encounter into a kind of resource puzzle. Naturally, stronger weapons come with higher costs, but offer greater damage, range, perks, or AoE, while certain abilities and tools let you regenerate cogs or reduce these costs. Each tech priests, which are your hero characters essentially, also have servo skulls, which can collect CP, reveal enemy stats, and with upgrades even deal damage. Everything feeds into this system, so you're always cognizant of that cog economy and deciding how best to spend it. Importantly though, it can all be influenced by your choices during the exploration phase, before the fight even begins. So with a bit of luck and good decision making, you can sometimes start fights ahead. Outside of the missions, there's still a lot of depth here. You can customize your party by experimenting with different disciplines, with no restrictions on multiclassing. There's a huge range of unlockable weapons and equipment, each with distinct mechanics that can change how encounters play out. There are also hidden missions, and depending on how you complete certain chains, it can impact later confrontations. The game has multiple systems working together to create a really well put together package. I won't go too much deeper into every mechanic, but there's definitely a lot going on under the surface. There's even the Heretic DLC, which adds a 7th class, additional missions, new tilesets, and more variety to the overall experience. And while it can feel a bit overwhelming at first, once it clicks, it's incredibly satisfying. Every decision before and during combat feeds into the bigger picture, and that constant push and pull between optimization and progression is what makes it so engaging. Funnily enough, this is my 40th retrospective review video, so it feels pretty fitting that it ended up being a 40k game. But even more fitting is that Warhammer 40,000 Mechanicus is an easy recommendation. It's a fantastic turn-based tactics game with a lot of depth, build variety, and replay value. It's a detailed portrayal of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and is backed by an incredible soundtrack. When I first started getting into Warhammer 40,000, I naturally gravitated toward the Space Marines. But after playing this, I've got a newfound respect for this faction of metallic faith. Now we just need a game with them greenskins as the protagonists. If you enjoy strategy games, or if you're just starting to explore the universe of Warhammer 40k, this might be one of the best entry points into the world. The flesh may be weak, but the deeds of this game endures. By the Omniscient, Warhammer 40,000 Mechanicus is worth playing today. If you've managed to sit through this whole video, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to let me know what else you'd like to see in the comments. Hopefully, I'll catch you in the next one.